Welcome to the Dynamics of Everyday Life, where we demystify some tricky concepts and get to know ourselves a little bit better. Welcome back to the Dynamics of Everyday Life. Today, I'm thinking about why we do things that cause us pain in the pursuit of something else. This can be beauty, maybe we're trying to look good in certain situations, or even some people pleasing. And the title of this episode, It Was the Shoes That Killed Me, is taken from one of my many conversations with my best friend in Paris. And when I was thinking about this and recording this episode, I realised I can't actually remember which one of us said this or what it was in reference to. I just remember thinking at the time that it was a fantastic title for an episode. So what can we be referring to when we're thinking about shoes that hurt us? And I think many of us have done this. I'm not going to be gender specific here. I think it's a very rare person who hasn't worn a pair of shoes because they look fabulous, but they rip our feet to shreds. And there's the obvious. We want to look good. We think that they suit us and make us look great. And if we think we look good, then we're likely to feel better about ourselves. As you know by now, for long-term listeners to the show, I've been doing these trips to Paris with my friend for many, many years. And before I hurt my back playing tennis, which actually makes me sound way more sporty and athletic than I actually am, I'd trot off to Paris for the weekend in high-heeled boots. We were so smug about our footwear and how glamorous we thought we were that we were even going to write a book called Travelling in Heels, just to show that it could be done. Oh, how I laugh now. I don't think I could even cover the osteopath's bills if I attempted that these days. And on one significant birthday, my husband treated me to a couple of pairs of really beautiful shoes. One pair was covered in sparkles, and I could barely stand up in these, but I loved them so much I'd force them onto my feet and make everyone admire them, whilst avoiding my grimaces of pain. Now, hilariously these days, I get complimented on my trainers. And 20 years ago, I'd have been utterly horrified that this would be my footwear of choice. But I digress. The point that I'm making here is that we'll wear things that hurt us to make us look good, or we think that they'll make us look good. So when you think about it, wearing shoes that cause us pain can be a fabulous metaphor for life. The parallel that I'm drawing here is that we can put something on because we think other people will appreciate it, without looking at how we feel about it. And to bring some psychodynamics into it, we don't want to think about it. We're often going to deny ourselves the pain, psychological, physical, you name it, because we want to appear a certain way. Chances are, though, that your feet, legs and back are not going to let you carry on forever without telling you in no uncertain terms that the shoes aren't working for you, no matter how fabulous you look. So you can try and deny it, but it's going to come up at some point. And then there's the issue of whether we say if they hurt us or not. There's a fabulous line in the film, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. If you've never seen it, highly recommend it. Where Marilyn Monroe says to Jane Russell, "Dorothy, a lady never admits her feet hurt." But who are we protecting here? Do we not want people to worry about us? Are we trying to keep part of ourselves private? Or maybe we're trying to appear a certain way. Are we more concerned about constructing a facade about who we are? We're saying that things don't hurt us when they actually do. But if we don't tell people how we feel, then they can't help us if we need help. I mean, I'm all for boundaries, yet we can sometimes set these at our own peril. If you think about it, we can end up being a bit like Rapunzel in the tower, where she's kept away from life to protect her, but she's not actually living, is she? If you ever needed a graphic representation of isolation, then you really can't do better than Rapunzel. However, there's also something about choosing your audience, the people around you, in telling them that your feet hurt and what has happened in your past experiences. So if you've always had the response that you chose the shoes and you'll have to put up with the pain, then you're going to stop telling people that your feet hurt. It makes sense why we stop asking for help and we start to over-rely on ourselves. And this can lead to our defence mechanisms creeping in. As we've mentioned before, there's denial, almost a "move along the bus please, there's nothing to see here" response, and this is unconscious. We can repress our feelings as they're just too painful for us to think about. You go to one of your primary carers to tell them that you're in pain and they reject you. And that's going to sting. Repression is where we squish everything into the unconscious that we don't want to think about. And what happens is that these feelings bubble around in there, bouncing up against other emotions and feelings and experiences. And then they come out in all kinds of seemingly unrelated ways. So maybe we snap at someone we didn't mean to, especially if our feet are hurting. It's also likely that you'll create all kinds of narratives around this. Maybe it is your fault after all, as you chose the shoes, took the action, etc., and decided to wear them. What might be going on here is there might actually be some projection happening from other people. Perhaps they would like to wear fabulous shoes or make the choices that you do, but they don't. And then what goes on for them is they can't bear their resentment, or maybe they've got some feelings of inadequacy, and so they project it into you. That also then means that you're at risk of projective identification. So what happens here is you start to think, well, maybe I shouldn't be wearing these shoes or making these decisions after all. Perhaps it's me that's in the wrong. Perhaps I shouldn't be doing this. So the key thing there is, whose voice are you listening to? Is it somebody else's voice that's telling you shouldn't be doing something, or is it yourself? We can also consciously choose to suppress things because we know it's going to upset us. And this can then lead to resentment and other feelings building up. So suppression is a bit different from repression because repression is unconscious, whereas we choose to suppress. Maybe we actively change the subject or we restrict topics of conversation because we just don't want to go there. Maybe it would be nice to talk to certain people in your life about particular topics, but they don't respond well, so you just don't have the conversation. I found that after my beloved friend Steve died, some people would actually change the subject if I ever mentioned him, and that was for their own reasons. So now I choose who I talk to about him very carefully. I still want to talk about him, and I think that's a bit of a shame. And to be honest, I can't say that I'm not frustrated about that. Our shoes are our foundations, what we rely on, or at least they are what support our feet, which, for those of us who are able-bodied, are what we use to carry us through the day. Now, if this isn't working, it's going to cause us a lot of problems. So thinking back over what we've talked about today, there's potentially a lot of self-sabotage going on here. If you don't have the right foundations, or you're wearing the wrong shoes, guess what? You're going to come tumbling down at some point. And when we're small, we fall over all the time. Well, I certainly did as a child, and there's generally not a problem with this, apart from the odd scraped knee. But as we get older, and hopefully wiser, this happens less, which is a pretty good job because falls when you're older can be a bit more serious. So we want to make sure that we aren't tripping ourselves up, either literally or figuratively. My invitation for you this week is for you to consider where in your life you've been wearing shoes that hurt. What might the reasons for this be? Have you been putting on your high heels for a night out, consciously wearing them for a specific reason and a finite amount of time? Or have you been feeling like you should have them on all day, every day, to live up to a particular vision of yourself? And as always, give yourself some grace. It can be difficult to recognise that perhaps we're doing something that has, in effect, been causing us harm and not doing us any favours. Looking at ourselves at this level can be challenging and unnerving as we develop our awareness, so I'd always encourage that you do this at your own speed. If you feel you need some extra help around this, then I've put together a PDF resource sheet and you can find the link for this in the show notes. If you'd like to have a chat with me about psychodynamics or whether I'm the right coach, supervisor or mentor for you, then click on the link that's also in the show notes. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Dynamics of Everyday Life. Please hit the follow button for future episodes and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on Instagram at The Dynamics of Everyday Life or find me on LinkedIn at Julia Rogers. I'd love to hear from you and hear your thoughts on dynamics. The Dynamics of Everyday Life is brought to you by Coaching 42 and the fabulous team at the Podcast Boutique.